Hey guys, it's Graham. What's cracking? I finished reading Alliance of Shadows by Larry Correia and Mike Kupri today. This is the third in the, I believe it's called Invisible Wars series. I'm not sure. All three of them have since been released in an omnibus from Baen Books, but I first started reading these in 2011. Dead Six was the first one, and then the second one was Swords of Exodus, and then this third one, Alliance of Shadows. It took a minute to come out because while Larry was writing full time at that point, I'm pretty sure he was, Mike Kupri was still, I believe, on active duty in the military. He was with the Air Force doing explosive ordnance disposal. And so that limited his time to actually sit down and clack at the keyboard. The conceit of this series, the premise, excuse me, is that there are these two main characters, Larry writes one and Mike writes the other, that cross paths when they are first used as pawns in this war by two secret societies trying to grapple for control of this, that, and the other thing. Throughout the books, it escalates, it does a little bit of globe-trotting. It's a very classical type thriller with just a hint of supernatural or paranormal or just maybe at the edge of the reality that we're comfortable with, like just a bit of those elements hanging out there in it. If you're a fan of the Y-Files on YouTube, which I am, just fantastic channel, fantastic program that AJ and his crew put together, or if you were the late night AM radio type from back in the day and used to listen to Coast to Coast, this is the kind of thriller that ought to appeal to you. The thing is, when I read the first book, I think I finished it in 2012. This wasn't the type of book that I was into. I mainly picked it up because the first two Monster Hunter books were out at this point, and I had really enjoyed those, so I was inclined to read anything that Larry wrote. Dead Six was Mike Kupri's first book. In fact, like this trilogy was his first trilogy, so I didn't really know what to expect from him, but yeah, I was on board with whatever Larry was writing. And so when I finished, actually, I think the first three Monster Hunter books were out at that point. Anyway, Squirrel, right? I didn't really get into thrillers all that much, and they weren't out on audiobook, which would have made it easier for me to plow through them. So I slogged my way through Dead Six, and then when the audiobook came out for Sword of Exodus a couple of years later, I read that one, and then I just never got around to Alliance of Shadows. But since then, I've developed a liking for thrillers. I started reading Tom Clancy of my own volition, and I've been reading all those Jack Reacher books. I've read a couple of the Terminal List books. Like, it's of interest to me now. I've got enough of a liking for the contributing elements to that kind of story that when somebody spins them all together in a good fiction yarn, like it appeals to me in that way. So the character Larry writes, his name is Lorenzo. He's a professional thief. The character Mike writes, his name is Valentine, and he, much like Mike, is a retired Air Force. And they both get contacted by people that they know to go to some random Middle Eastern country called Zubara. It's a made-up country for the purposes of this story. And it's there that they cross paths while they're hunting for the same MacGuffin, and then later they decide to team up. And the first book is the longest one in the series. At the end of the first book, Valentine gets kidnapped by some shady organization, and Lorenzo gets away with his heist, but he decides he might need to get back into the game later. In Swords of Exodus, Valentine gets rescued, but he doesn't know what was done to him while he was in captivity. He finds out later that he had some psychological experimentation done to him, and that has relevance for the third book. At the end of the second book, it's Lorenzo's turn to get captured in a place called the Crossroads, somewhere out near Mongolia, where all these crime lords kind of have this pop-up city. And Valentine is off continuing the work of these shady organizations that they get pulled into. As the series progresses, Lorenzo and Valentine stop becoming pawns and they become more proactive players. They take initiatives with the schemes and against the villains and the enemies that they've made along the way, because they find out that there are secret societies tugging at the strings of the entire world, and some of the players in those societies want to commit nuclear terrorism. One group is the literal Illuminati. The other one is a group called Majestic. Exodus is just a mercenary group, but they become kind of the group that's fighting back against both of these guys to make sure nobody blows up the whole dang world. The supernatural elements get a little bit stronger as it goes along, but there's also a bit of like, well, maybe this isn't supernatural. Maybe this is the kind of like CIA, MK Ultra type stuff that we have actual documentation on is a real thing. Subtle programming in people or tricking their brains to make them more hyper analytical, and then you can have something that's basically the functional equivalent of a precog, things like that. That's where it sits at the intersection of the like coast to coast and Y-Files type stuff, and it just adds an extra layer of intrigue to what would otherwise be a globe-trotting thriller where guys that don't play by the rules go to fight secret societies and save the world. So that's how it kind of fits in, and it satisfies the staples of that genre, but then it stands out by adding all those little pieces that are extra. The development for Lorenzo and Valentine is really great. In addition to them like gaining respect for one another and slaying their own personal demons and getting girlfriends and all of that stuff. I was really, really satisfied with the way that it ended. The third book was also the shortest. I'm just going to chalk that up to, I'm sure, like when Mike Cooper sat down to write it, he didn't want to drag it out any longer than they had. And honestly, like the pacing in the third one was a lot tighter. If I remember right, this was a story that Larry and Mike had started writing on like a gun forum or something years ago, like before Larry even published his first book or somewhere right around that time, like when he self-published MHI. And you can see the progression in their writing style and in the writing, like the caliber, the quality of it as the series progresses. And I think that's also got to be a contributing factor to each book being a little bit shorter than the last, because they knew how to kind of tighten the focus and contribute to better pacing in that way. So a strong ending. I will grab the other two in paperback to have them for my library now, because I'm sure I'll read them again at some point. I'll probably have a greater appreciation for a lot of the slower details in Dead 6 now that I've gotten to the end and seen that, like, okay, yeah, this is really good. I didn't enjoy it like as much as MHI or Hard Magic or any of the other like trilogies and stuff that Larry has written, but it was, if you were to just like pit it up against any other mainstream thriller, like I think it's a cut above those. I've read probably, like outside of this series, I think I've read like 3 books by Mike Cooper at this point. My favorite being The Family Business. He had this space one that I got to the end of it. I was like, okay, fine, take it or leave it. Like he's a good writer. He doesn't always write things that I'm interested in. That Family Business one was really good. His chops definitely improved from the first book to the third book here, which you would only expect from somebody who puts in the work. So that's why I'm keeping my ear to the ground on other books of his that are coming out. I think I've still got to read Trouble Walked In. That one's on Audible, so I need to grab that one. But yeah, a hearty recommendation for the Invisible Wars series. Dead 6, Swords of Exodus, and Alliance of Shadows. If you pick up Dead 6 and you think like this is mostly good, it's just a little bit slower, whatever, stick through it because they really nail the landing. Final note, content warning, it's a thriller, so they're not trying to shy away, like they're not leaning too hard on like the harshness of it, but it is there. Like the combat scenes are really intense. There's a lot of language up to the F -- bomb. It's not like he's trying too hard to put it all in there, but there is plenty of it. So just be advised on that front. But that is a recommendation from me. All right, it's my weekend now, so oh crap, this is the wrong street. So interested in this series and sharing it with you guys that I ended up on the wrong road. All right, drive safe. See you out there.